Hey, folks.
Hi.
Um,
Sorry.
if we can, so really quickly, I want to preemptively say we have a ton that we're going to try to share with you guys. So the first part of this session is going to be one of those sessions where we're really going to try to highlight for you something that's been really successful in our schools. And what that means is, like, you might think at first, like, oh, these circumstances, as we describe this culture that we've built, it's not exactly. So the goal is to not just tell you, this is what we did, but also for you to be able to look at it and get some key takeaways. So by the end, please, if you've got questions where you're like, hey, so we can't do exactly what you did, here's some circumstances, and you want to brainstorm or talk about what pieces you want to hear more about that you'll pull. Like, look for those, because this is not something where we're going to tell you this program and this is the only way you could do it. This is an example where you could then see, like, how can I use what they did to build something in my building? So.
And also to add to that, this session is kind of like an overview of STEM at South-Doyle High School. There were actually 4 other sessions that happened throughout the day here and virtually. So if you're really interested in, like, this disaster scenario unit and you missed that, you can go back on the TSIN's website and take a look at the videos. So all of the units that we're highlighting are going to be up on that with all of the resources that are there for you too. We definitely believe in caring and sharing, so all of our stuff is spread out everywhere for you all to have access to. So my name is Katie DeVinney. I teach STEM and technology and computer science at South-Doyle High School, and I am also the first robotics mentor at our school.
Yeah, I'm Trent McLees. I am the library and media specialist at our school, and I do a lot of, like, the STEM collaboration and lesson planning and unit planning for the STEM classes as well, plus incorporating it into core content classrooms and really helping make some innovative units in the core content areas as well.
Oh, it worked. Sorry. So this is kind of an overview of what we're going to be doing today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about South-Doyle High School and what makes the place so special. And then we're going to look at what are the different steps that we've taken in the process of implementing STEM and really creating the STEM or STEAMy culture that we have. Sorry. That was his pun, not mine, and I'm really bad at pulling it off.
And I stand by it wholeheartedly. I think it's a great pun.
Then we're going to break down these units that we've created so you all can kind of get an idea of how we backwards design them and plan them, and how these teachers that are here hanging out with us figured out ways to make it work. And then finally, if we have time, we'll have some Q&A, and also hopefully have some time where you all can come up and play with, like, our video game arcade cabinet and the Spheros and the microbit. Where's the microbit? I don't know where I put it. It's fine. So first off, let me talk about South-Doyle. This place is really special for me and for a lot of us here. What I love about South-Doyle is how diverse it is as a school. We are a Title I school, and about 60% of our students are free and reduced lunch. So that provides a lot of unique challenges for our students, for the community, and for our teachers. And about 20% of our students are African American or Hispanic. The why. Why are we doing STEM? Why am I so passionate about STEM? I used to be a Spanish teacher 2 years ago, and then I just started really getting involved with it and have completely, like, changed courses, and now I'm teaching STEM full-time. So why is that? This picture up here is my robotics team. Do you notice anything about that picture? It's all boys. It's all boys. I hate it. I hate it. It's all boys. They know how much I hate it. They're like, do you hate me? I was like, no, I just don't like that you're a boy. But I'm just kidding. I love you. I just want more girls. So that is my why, is I want the diversity that we have at our school needs to be more represented in the STEM community at our school, you know. And this is just one small sliver of STEM. We have a lot of other things going on in STEM, but you'll see this kind of throughout. It's all mostly male-dominated, and also mostly, it's just not very diverse. And so the whole reason why we're doing STEM and we're implementing STEM throughout the whole school is that we want to increase enrollment in the STEM-focused CTE courses so that these courses are more indicative of what we have in our student population. And of course, in so doing that, we're going to be exposing more kids to STEM and to the careers in STEM that are going to get them ready for jobs of the future. And so it might be hard to see these stats, but Pew Research did some research in 2021 and looked at what does STEM look like in the careers. And this one here is basically showing you females in STEM. And if you see that number right there, this is what I teach is technology and engineering. 15% of engineering jobs are female. 15%. So that's kind of like my picture, right? Well, maybe a little bit more girls in that picture. And then 25% are in computer jobs. And of course, you have health-related jobs, that's 74%. So we, as a community, the United, we need to work on that. Sorry. And then same thing with Black and Hispanic workers. Only 9% of Black workers are represented in STEM, as well as 8% with Hispanic workers. So there's something for us to do. And I feel like that starts in our schools, and it starts with us. So our goal with STEM 1, so let me back up. So what we've done at our school is this past year, we created a class which we deemed STEM 1, and it's a class that all freshmen have to take. They weren't all excited about that. They're like, I have to take this? I was like, yeah, you have to take it. But they're taking it, and for the most part, they're liking it. And so the goal of this was that this is going to be like a gateway into all of these different careers and different CTE pathways that we have to try to increase more exposure into these pathways. Some of these pathways we've already had, like we had health science. We have a really popular health science pathway at our school, as well as an architectural and engineering pathway. But we have created a technology pathway, which is what I teach. And we are going to be creating a coding pathway because of the interest from STEM 1 next year. We're hoping that with this interest, we'll also be able to start creating an advanced manufacturing pathway within the welding pathway, as well as a digital arts pathway and potentially an audiovisual production pathway. So I think this is where it lies, is that STEM 1 is not just the STEM, it's everything. And that's what we're kind of starting to notice at the culture of our school. So we've done surveys with kids, be like, how do you like STEM? What do you think? But I think the biggest indicator of what do kids think about STEM is what are they signing up for next year? And I got these numbers yesterday, and this was like the warm and fuzzies, and I got so excited about this. So of our freshman class that all took this STEM 1 course, almost 75% of them decided that they want to continue a path of STEM next year. That's a big number. I think it's a big number. I don't know. The computer science foundations course, which we have never offered before, we have 55 kids signed up for that next year. And 30% of those are females. So that 15% number of the United States, we're doubling that in our school next year. The engineering class that I teach, that class, let's see here. This year I probably had 100 kids. I had 5 girls in there. This next year I'll have 30% of them are going to be female. And of the computer science foundations class, 63% of them are going to be these freshmen that are going into it, as well as my technology pathway, half of them are going to be freshmen, the upcoming sophomores. So I feel like this is showing that what we're doing is working, and so that's our why. Oh, no.
So the reason that we're bringing this to you guys is because if you can institute anything, any one of these pieces, they support the other pieces. So we were able to institute this STEM 1 class, and so suddenly you have a quarter of your student population doing something STEMmy. And that means they're talking about it. That means they're working on it. That means it's something in their brains. So is anybody in here a library media specialist or no one? Okay. Nice. So this role that I have, and a role, it's going to have something in common with all of yours, which is that you have to collaborate with other people to get something off the ground. What I found and what we found in our school is by getting our students to have their foot in the door, it made it a lot easier for everybody else to go through that door. The students were kind of the first piece, and now we're able to do STEM projects in core content areas. We're able to do STEM projects everywhere. So we have a couple to highlight. We've got our geometry teachers used Spheros, so they were able to integrate coding and Spheros and robotics into their curriculum to teach triangle calculations and coding skills by making pool tables. with Spheros. If we keep going, we'll see that I worked with our art teacher, and we had a whole 3-class collaboration, and this is something we're really excited about. You can come actually see the product of it, where STEM 1, one of the curriculums, designed video games. Those students then described their video games. They pitched them to the marketing class and to the art students and said, like, this is what my game is about. These are my values with the game. This is what I would want it to look like. And the art students took that feedback and designed art for that video game. Meanwhile, engineering students took that feedback and designed arcade cabinets for those games. So we actually have some pictures here, and we have one of the cabinets up here, where those 3 things produced functioning arcade cabinets with games and art, all made by students. We've got math classes that are learning computer-aided design and physical science to make 3D printed models. And all of these collaborations are things that spring up because 25% of our students are interested, because our teachers are getting exposed to STEM, and they are teaching it from a place of maybe a lower degree of familiarity by empowering a English teacher or a social studies teacher to say, you're qualified, like you can do this, let us teach you, let us get you there, and then let us empower you to do this. It makes people want to bring it into their curriculum as well, and it opens the door to these kinds of cooler projects that infiltrate your whole school culture. So you can, we don't need to watch, it's a cool slow-mo video. If you want to download the slides, you can see the cool slow-mo video of the balloon-powered cars in motion. And really quickly, I'm super passionate about this one, so I want to tell you guys about it. Those of you who are in the East Tennessee STEM Hub, something that comes up a lot is storytelling. That's a big passion of mine, as is literacy, and I think we often, when we talk about STEM, sometimes we don't say STEAM, we drop the A. Sometimes we don't see the connections to literacy standards or to art or to those other things, and they're definitely there. So we've got students that are learning traditional folklore storytelling practices while they learn technology-driven videography skills, and they're synthesizing those 2 things to collaborate with our elementary school, tell stories to our elementary school, create a digital library of storytelling performances for our elementary schoolers to interact with, increase circulation of folktale books, and increase access to this kind of technology as a communication tool. So that's a project that we're really passionate about that some of our media students are involved in, and our art students are getting involved using digital tools to create the arcade cabinets, to CAD 3D models, to make sculptures, we've got some 3D scanners we're about to start integrating into that curriculum. A lot of these things that we talk about, the moment I said 3D scanner, something came to my mind where I was like, oh no, are people gonna think they have to buy a 3D scanner? You don't. There are some really powerful free CAD tools that we can point you in the direction of. There are really powerful free online video editing tools. A lot of this can be done with the right amount of passion and the right amount of upper level support. So anybody in here who is an administrator, something that I think is really empowering for our school is that this was something where we did a lot of front-loading investment. And what I mean by that is, like, Katie worked really hard on developing an initial curriculum. Administration worked hard to make sure the schedule worked to support this. So if you can put a big foot forward, it can make a lot of the subsequent projects come a little bit easier because you put that big planning foot forward and really put your money where your mouth is in terms of a program. So we're going to quickly walk you through the steps that we took, because hopefully you can consider, like, how could we arrange these steps to work in our school? So the first step is to get your teachers that you know will want to do this with you. So we know that for us, STEM 1 was a freshman course, so it needed to be a course that would be able to be staffed for all of our incoming freshmen. It required a team effort. It required a lot of people. And the reason that it worked so well, I would argue, is because we made sure it included teachers from every content area, every core content area, because what this does is it encourages those teachers to see the connections that already exist between their content areas and STEM. With ELA, you're already doing STEM skills. When you're talking about the design thinking process of ideating, you're already doing that in ELA when you're working on your writing. You're working on your research skills. In science, I mean, it's in the name. I'm not going to explain how science connects to STEM. We all get. But same with math. Like, math is the language. But a lot of stuff with social studies, I think, gets glazed over. the empathy part of learning about history and the empathy part of figuring out where your technology can make an impact on a community, why you need to learn these STEM skills. It's not just so you can code a cool robot and make a lot of money. Designing a website doesn't just not impact people. Websites have actual tangible consequences for the real world. Those empathy skills are skills that are strongly ingrained in the social studies curriculum. And so by recruiting teachers who were in these content areas, you're able to get a pool of skills that you might not have thought of, and your students are able to have teachers who are modeling that curiosity, that exploration, and that cross-curricular connection that we're wanting them to do. And so it naturally, organically becomes a modeling process. And in our case, we typically had the units arranged where it was maybe like at least 3 of these 4 classes were represented in the team for each unit. So the folks who were doing the robotics unit, there were 2 math teachers, 2 English teachers, 1 math teacher, and 1 science teacher. And so in each stage, this is similar to what I was talking about, but each stage of our design thinking process, the empathy and define stages, this is where social studies and ELA can be key. They really get to work in their wheelhouse. When you move into that ideate and prototype stage, everybody does this in their classrooms already. So when we can teach in that way that we're familiar with, we're not throwing our students for a loop and we're not throwing ourselves for a loop. And then testing and presenting, these are things that science and math classes have been doing. Testing, doing experimentation, writing your experiment logs for a lab class. So all of these are in the standards already, which makes it easier to pitch this kind of intervention to your staff when you are telling them it doesn't not align with your standards. All of those things that you get tested on, that you get evaluated on, that stress you out, helping people see STEM actually aligns with that thing that you're about to get tested on, so we're not trying to like throw another thing on your plate. This supports your end goal is really key.
Okay, so did I just turn it off? Can you hear me? Dang. Can I use yours? Yeah. I turned it off thinking I'd be like, and then I turned it off for good. Oh well, it's fine. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what it was like to design the STEM 1 curriculum and what each unit looks like. Like Trent has said, we have 16 teachers that are teaching this STEM 1 class all at the same time. And we definitely made it cross-curricular so that we're really focusing on that design thinking process. So if we were to create a mission statement of this class, we would say we want this class, the point of it is to inspire and enable students to pursue STEM. That inspiring piece in our curriculum is looking at career exploration and careers specifically with each unit that fit well in the unit. So for instance, this is a disaster scenario unit. So we looked at first responders and careers in first responding and in healthcare, as well as in robotics and engineering. And then the second piece of that is that enabling piece, and that's looking at the tools and the skills that students need to learn to be able to succeed in STEM and in the 21st century. So I'm going to back up and start with that enabling piece. We kind of focused on 2 main core pieces of that. The first part was on that coding piece. These are some of the tools that we used. We got a bunch of microbits, and so we use those. I love microbits, so if you all have ever worked with them, or if you have no idea, if you want to come talk to me about those, I'll definitely would love to talk to you about them. We also used these Sphero bolts that we had to code, have to go through these scenarios here. And then the Make Code Arcade is a really cool tool that's free that you could use to make video games with your students. And then the second big skill piece that we looked at was this physical modeling piece and creating. And so with that, we started off with cardboard and had some kids just do some cardboard, use some X-Acto knives to make some bridges, and then to use that and to ideate and to iterate by then switching over to Tinkercad, which is a free software you could use on your Chromebooks, to then design in the physical world, or in the digital world, sorry. And then from that design, then we would 3D print or laser cut those things. So that is a lot of equipment, but you can get a 3D printer for $200, and they're pretty good too. And same thing, this CAD software is completely free. And a laser cutter is a lot more expensive, but we were able to do a lot with an X-Acto knife and cardboard, so it's possible. And then the Inspire piece, there are kind of, like I said, 3 core parts that we looked at. The first part was that career exploration piece, where within each unit, embedded within that was a week of students looking through that defined learning and looking at different careers within each unit to see what exists here in Tennessee and what are the different skills that I need as a student to get myself ready for those careers that I might be interested in. All of our units are PBL focused, so each of them have some kind of a project at the end, and some are a little bit more real world than others. Some of them are kind of like fun craft projects, but I feel like that one, the kids were the most engaged with that. So, it's okay if they're not always real world. Oh, I think there was another thing that I had. Oh, and then of course, all of it in the design planning, we use the D-thinking process. We call it the SD thinking process, but it's the design thinking process for that.
And so
I got it to work.
at this stage, you are probably thinking that I'm a wizard who can turn on microphones. So the catch then, stage 1, we said we had to identify some people, some collaborative partners, some teachers that could really be willing to take this big investment. Stage 2 is designing that curriculum and creating some shared language, a shared vocabulary. And so we really kind of like crunch time had to figure out how can we make sure folks get what they need to do this successfully. And so it was time to make sure everybody was up to speed. And so the ways we did that in 2 major ways. One is consistent like planning meetings with either Katie and myself, or just Katie, or just me, or just the cluster planning together. So this is something that it's difficult to do. You might need to work with your schedule. You might need to work on off time, but making sure the teachers have time to co-plan. And a big way that we supported this was we really tried to have these units fleshed out in advance. We really tried to have these units kind of, as much as possible, planned for teachers, so the teachers would have a take and go, run with it curriculum that they could then tweak, and we're empowered to modify and react the way teachers always do, right? We might be given a curriculum, and then we say, well, that's not going to vibe with my students, I have to change it. But trying to make that curriculum that was provided as robust and planned out as possible so that those modifications can be smaller. And then over the summer, we did a STEM 101 PD session where we had some long days over the summer of a lot of exploratory activities. And I think this is something that was probably really cool for the teachers, where these teachers are not just coming in and it's like, this is what you have to teach your students. Instead, we're going to learn about it the way our students learn about it. Because that way, when you go and teach it, you have a real familiarity with the learner perspective. You have a real familiarity. So we did a summer PD where we learned how to CAD, how to slice, how to 3D print, and how to code using the platforms that we would be teaching from. And so after all of this, it becomes time to do the last stage of design thinking, where you circle back and you iterate and you iterate and you iterate. So we found ourselves with these 4 following units. All of the materials for these units were very, like Katie said, were open source, tech-minded. So all these materials are things that you can acquire, you can ask about. If you came to a session, I presented it earlier, at the end of our session, we had a link to the entire video game unit curriculum that you could just download. So please ask about getting these things. So the first unit we'll quickly run you through the way it flows is the Robots as First Responders unit.
Is that me or you? I'll talk.
Oh, no, this one is me. So stage 1 is you got to think about why on earth would we be doing this? And Katie already mentioned, by the time we get to the end, it does kind of look arts and crafty. That's okay, because if we do our job at the empathy phase, then students are able to connect and say, yeah, sure, at this stage my robot is rolling through the cardboard that I crafted, but the skills that I'm deploying are the same skills that somebody who's actually piloting a robot in a bomb diffusing situation or in a rescue situation would be using. So we establish that transferability at the beginning with empathy. That's where we establish, like, why do we care about this? And then when we get to define, we start looking at some of these real world scenarios. We start looking at what are the contexts in which we use robots and why do we need them? You present your problem. The problem is there's a disaster. the robot needs to get into this scenario, what are some of the criteria and what are some of the boundaries that the robot's going to need to respond to? That's when we're defining and ideating. We're defining what the criteria for the problem are, and we're going to ideate how do we create a robot that gets through that stuff. They got to use grade paper to set up mazes, and they tested those mazes against each other. They were programming their robots. They then continued to test until they finally got to this sometimes interlinked, sometimes independent city where we used Fiero robots and used all the capabilities within, sending messages, speaking, sound, color, to represent the different things robots might do in a disaster. Understand that this takes place over 9 weeks. So you might spend a week or more empathizing. You might spend a week or more crafting, but the whole thing is continuously revolving around this central problem. It helps students really develop that buy-in over time. You can see some pictures of that process here.
Something that I think we forgot to mention is that if you're like really into this and you want to do this with your school, just keep in mind our teachers didn't teach every single unit. They just taught one unit all year. And then every 9 weeks when they rotated, they just got a new set of kids. So the kids were rotating to the teachers every 9 weeks. And so we thought it was really nice for the teachers because they weren't overburdened with having to learn all of these new skills, because that's like a lot. And I think it was good too, because I think the kids would get excited because like, I have the robots units coming next. Oh my gosh, you know. So
it also makes it easier to then iterate on that process.
Yeah.
I think you can talk to some of the teachers as well. Some of them are in this room, and they will tell you the unit they deployed the first 9 weeks and the unit they deployed the fourth 9 weeks are not 100% identical. A lot of modification happened. The students were part of that modification as well, so the students got to see sort of their feedback play out over time as every unit improved.
So the next unit that I'm going to talk a little bit about is our community garden unit. It actually started as a greenhouse unit, and then we learned that the greenhouse was like, you can't even like touch it or it's going to fall down. So then we transferred over to doing like a community garden instead. And I think there's a little bit more of an application for everybody in this because not everyone has a greenhouse. So the empathy piece for that, we really looked at food insecurity. You know, like I said, our kids, a lot of them are food insecure. So this was a really like touchy subject, and I think it really inspired a lot of them. We looked at food insecurity in the United States, but also like in Guatemala and in Colombia and in other countries. The defining piece, we looked at what is it going to take, like just what would it take to build a community garden at our school? Like the lead for this is a social studies teacher. Like she obviously doesn't have any, sorry, but you don't have any experience with planting plants or biology things. So literally we're like, what does it take? Like we have no idea. So it was a true problem for us. And then we did a lot of ideating, and for that was our research phase, and we looked in researching what are schools doing in our area that are doing community gardens, what are schools in the United States doing that are doing community gardens, how is it working, what is not working, what are some cool tech that we could use if we wanted to use some tech in this. Then students created different versions of prototypes throughout the year. As Trent said, there was a lot of iteration. I think we finally found our footing this last iteration, and students are actually looking at proposing, like creating a proposal for a grant. Like they're actually looking at grants and having to figure out how could I propose something to get $5,000 for our school to get a garden. So right now they're working on the rough drafts of those presentations, and they're presenting to each other in their class first to get some feedback. And then finally, for the final presentation, they're going to be presenting it to some community partners that we've had, such as Beardsley Farms, the Arboretum, our principal, and other people, and each other, obviously, for that. Here's kind of some pictures. At this unit, throughout the year, we implemented some data collection stuff to see, like, where would be good spots to put a garden was part of our problem. So we use these microbits to look and see what is the data showing us of what a good spot is. We also looked at potentially, like, doing some automated gardening, so use the microbits to do some prototyping with that as well.
But before I talk about the mental health and video game, I want to point out with the community garden, I think it is the best example of if one of your concerns, which I think a valid concern with this is, hey, once we do this unit and the students go through it, are we just going to keep doing the same thing over and over? Is every student going to get, like STEM is constantly evolving. We need a curriculum that we can sort of update. that can grow with us. So the beauty of the community garden one is as that program and the interventions that it creates come to fruition, I use that purposefully, as the garden starts to grow, the grants that they will write will need to change. And so the curriculum doesn't necessarily fundamentally change, but the work the students do builds on work previous students have done. And so you're learning to write a grant, but now you actually have garden beds already built. What else do we need to improve our garden? Now you know we need help supporting the labor, but we got CNC garden bots with our last grant, which is a real cool technology that's developing. So how are we gonna make sure we can maintain those? What do we need to prototype to improve those? So the students have a very clear pathway for how that curriculum builds on previous work. So the curriculum itself mirrors the STEM process. I think this one is one of the most cool examples because it hits this empathize so major. It's the one I'm perhaps most passionate about. So when you're thinking about one of the coolest things for STEM for students, video games comes to mind. Students just love gaming. I love gaming. I think it's a cool thing. And coding is a really powerful tool that works not just to create games, but works as a language. It works to create, it sort of undergirds all computer interface technology. So the students started by thinking about what's going on with mental health, and then adding into that, what's going on with mental health and technology? How do these things interact with one another? There's so much narrative stigma in the media about how video games are bad for our mental health, but then there's also a lot of studies and reports talking about how they're sort of a protective factor in people's lives and a great stress management tool and a good mental health support. And so let's really understand the two sides of that discussion. Let's empathize with that experience, and let's put ourselves in that experience as well, because many of our students are there. And from there, you can start thinking about, how can I make a video game that reflects this? Whether I interview one of my classmates and make a game to be a supportive factor for them, or rather I make a game to be a supportive factor for myself. I come up with some game concepts and I share them with my peers, and then I start prototyping my code. Maybe the first thing I need to do is nail down the sprite and the gravity for my game. You know, I need it to be able to jump. And then I can test jumping, and I can keep moving forward. I can have people play test my game, so they go through the game development experience. The way it happens in the real world, game development has quality testers, it has play testers. So we have our students be each other's play testers. We have our students have an exploratory experience where they play games from previous units and critique those games. It becomes a cycle. I designed an exemplar game for them for this one where it was an infinite loop game. So you wandered, and then when you got to the top, it just took you right back to the beginning. And you had to talk to everybody in the game, and you had to figure out what it is they needed before you could break out of the loop. And your sprite was a ghost. And I did this, and I would tell them this after they played it. They would be like, Mr. McLees, what was that? What was that game about? That was kind of weird. It was really annoying. I was like, yeah, it was. And what I was trying to display with that game was the way it kind of feels when you're in a depressive episode, when you're kind of caught in this loop searching for purpose. You kind of don't know what's going on in your life. You're feeling really anxious. You don't know what your value is. And you're in this negative loop cycle. And unless you ask for help, unless you make those contracts with people, make those connections, it's very difficult to get out. So the whole message of the game was symbolically linked to mental health. And having that frank conversation with students, some of them would then come back to me like, you know what, Mr. McLees, I don't see it. We're like, fair enough, but you know what? It felt really good for me to make the game. We're like, oh, that's cool. And others of them would be like, no, I get that too. Okay, I totally see it. Yeah, and at the end, it's because I did this for this person, and that felt good, and it felt like this experience in my life. It's like, yeah, it does feel good to help people. So this one became you can see a lot of interaction. They're interacting in the library, playing the games together. We've got our principal laying on the floor, playing their games with them as a demonstration. It was a great way for STEM to move out of the isolated laboratory stereotype and into this, hey, you really have to empathize with people and think about the human experience when you're doing STEM.
Okay, so the last unit that we had was the engineering unit. Sometimes there was sustainability in that, and other times it's kind of evolved to just be a bunch of iteration in engineering, which is awesome. Oh, no. Okay. So there's kind of, this unit is like a couple of different mini units combined into one that really focus in on the iteration phase. So one of them that I really liked is the bridge one. And we kind of start with the empathy phase of like, what would life be like if we didn't have bridges? Like, what would happen to things, the world? And then they kind of look in the defining, and they're looking at like, how are bridges vital in our community and in infrastructure? They do a design challenge where they have to try to design the lightest but strongest bridge. And that's where first we started with X-Acto knives and cardboard. And then we went into Tinkercad, and they did digital versions of that. And then we used a laser cutter to cut that out. So they kind of got the excitement of like seeing something digital and then physical is a really cool experience that they get to see. And then we would just have competitions to see who the winner would be for that. Another part of this that I really liked was we did a litter bot. We had a problem with trash. I think everyone has a problem with trash. Like, trash is just a problem. And so the kids were noticing it, and they're like, do you know how much trash we have at our school? I was like, yeah, we do have a lot of trash. Let's talk about it. And so the empathy phase was we had them think about, like, how does litter and trash impact their lives and impact others' lives as well as our environment. And then the defining part is they looked at how much litter do we actually have on campus, and where is that litter, and why is that litter there? Then we did a design challenge with that where, like, let's pretend that there are these robots around school that were designed to only collect trash. Like, what would these robots look like? And what could we do to code them so that they could be collecting trash autonomously? Then they went into the iteration phase where they made a couple different prototypes with that. And then finally in the presentation phase, they just had competitions in class to see how much trash could their robot collect. And so what I really like about this unit is, it's hard to see here, but we actually had the kids during the hour of code, volunteer kids made an app where you could like click on different locations in the map. And we edited it just a little bit so they would click on locations and they'd be like, oh, I see a bottle, or oh, look, another face mask. That was like the most popular trash at that moment. Not so much anymore, but yeah. And so then we were able to put it on a map. We then put it into Google Earth, and you're able to see where all the trash is, where a majority of the trash is getting collected. And they're like, bro, all the trash is like on the sides. And they're like, well, that's because the wind picks it up and like moves it. And I was like, good job. Okay, so anyways, so that was a great defining moment, and I was really proud of that app and what our kids made with that. And then from that, then they made these little trash robots, litter bots. I didn't make that pun, he did. I think, do you see a pattern with puns? Not me, it's all him. Anyways, so what we did was in that CAD and Tinkercad, the students 3D modeled something that they could attach to these little robots, and then these were our little autonomous robots that they programmed to collect trash, aka like little pieces of paper on the floor. These robots are, you can code these with microbits. I have one somewhere that if you want to play with them, I have it. So you could also program a controller and you can control them too. So those are a lot of fun. These are pictures of the bridge design. As you can tell, that one was the X-Acto knives, and the kids absolutely hate the X-Acto knife because it was really hard for them to like get intricate designs that they wanted to do. But then, oh, those are just the X-Acto knives ones. But then when they're able to laser cut it, they're like, I could do anything. I was like, yeah, you can. That's what's so great about digital technology, man. And so yeah, that one was a lot of fun. Anything, Chad?
I know we are much shorter on time than we anticipated to be. So what we'd like to do is, if you have any questions for us, please, like, we'll open the floor to them. And then if after the session, if you want to come up, and we have some of the games students made that you can play. You can check out the Sphero environments. You can check out the microbits. We wanted you to have the opportunity to interact with all the technology that we've talked about today. So we have that up here for your interactive pleasure. Does anybody have any questions for us, though? Anything you'd like to hear about? Or
I do have to say, we do have some like gifts to give away. So if we see you playing with our stuff, you get free things. But
so the PowerPoint should be linked in the app, and what we'll do is make sure also in the app, if it's not there, I'll get in touch with them to make it get there by the end of the day. And that's also where you'll find the links to unit downloads and things like that as well. I'll go ahead and have them put the video game information in the app for this session as well, so you don't have to look two places.
And feel free to email us too
Yeah.
with any questions or if you need more resources.
Take a picture of the slide. That's our contact information.
Yeah.
I'm a librarian, so I like to talk about tech stuff and answer questions. That's kind of my whole gig. So if you have questions, please do email them.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, all of our sessions are pre-recorded. So if you're like really into the community garden one, we have a pre-recorded session that you can go watch. Or if you really like the video game one, that one's going to be recorded, so you can go back and watch that as well.
And the robots as first responders have a unit presentation that they did earlier that I think was also recorded, so you can find that information.
And the engineering one is also a pre-recorded session. That one really focused on the community partners because we had a lot of really awesome community partners help us out with that.
Yeah. So all of those things are also available in the app and through the conference. Cool. Well, thank you guys for listening to us for so long, and hopefully it gives you some great ideas for your schools. Please come up and check out this stuff, and we're happy to answer any other questions.